When many girls were crushing on Justin Bieber in fifth grade, my ultimate crush, childhood crush, was Mr. Rochester. Some of you may be familiar with the face of masculinity in the renowned novel, Jane Eyre. Can I have a show of hands who have read Jane Eyre? That's great. But for some of you who haven't read Jane Eyre, it is the moving story of an orphaned girl who has to go live with her aunt, Mrs. Reed, and her children. After school, Jane decided to apply for a governess job, and this is where the sentimental love story all began. She was to teach Adele, Mr. Rochester's daughter, and while strolling in the gardens of Thornfield, unaware that she had met Mr. Rochester, she helped him after he had just fell off his horse. Then, fate played its role, and they decided to get married despite many obstacles from his past. I was a mere 10 years old at that time, so I didn't really question and understood how I connected to all of this. But as I got older and reread the book for maybe the 10th time, I started to wonder, what makes this novel so compelling? How and why the characters Jane and Mr. Rochester sparked my obsession? As young teenagers, will we ever be able to comprehend this magical complexity of romance as today's illusion of love and surface perceptions of fondness for each other blinds us of real romance? Frankly, we won't understand it completely until actually experiencing it. I didn't understand it completely before because as far as I was concerned back then, romantic feelings were the equivalent of crushes that we wouldn't talk to in person but would be happy to text to all night long. We would be text you all night long. As we progress into the 21st century, we as a generation, we are so absorbed in this virtual world and illusion of love that we become oblivious to the reality as well as our partners. The only justifiable reason for us to date is to post on social media. Well, to overcome this, Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, Edith Wharton, and among many other names are my key to reinforcing my heart and soul into reality and away from all those delusions. Perhaps that's why I became so infatuated with these novels. At a young age, we were influenced with things like Disney's cliché happily ever afters and marriage, even when they have just met. Similarly, in 2018, people can just spontaneously form an instant bond and felt as if they were meant to be. But in literature, love, specifically, for example, Jane Eyre, love is not an illusion. They bonded in traditional ways by talking and actually getting to know each other physically, overcame actual and emotional obstacles to craft the magnificent love that they have. It is not just simply texting someone, "Sorry, babe, my Wi-Fi was out," or "I fell asleep," or even, "Yeah, we'll talk later," but end up avoiding each other the next day to make true love. Because of this media concocted world that we live in today, our inner romantic potential may seem dead as we do not engage in ways before. But my theory is that literature may be the key to unlocking and mending these broken pieces inside of us, like our interpretations of romance, among many other aspects. Literature, as you can see from my love for Jane Eyre, has inevitably been a part of me. Every single time I reread one of these novels, there are just so many new interpretations that my brain cannot cease to uncover. Everything's a novelty to me. I'm sure that other genre of books has got you hooked into going through the same process as I did. Through literature, not only do we recognize and clearly visualize the romantic aspects, but we see ongoing issues prevalent to our generation. Here's a quote from Jane Austen's renowned novel, Emma. "I may have lost my heart, but not my self-control." This is a quote that has resonated with me for quite some time. It touches on a very prevalent issue that we young teenagers and young adults may come to understand, as we have all had those times where we fell head over heels for a guy or a girl. In a globalized culture where social media rule our minds and souls, it is easy to get immersed and lost as we are so immersed in these artificial dalliances. For instance, we as a generation are always on social media like Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, posting on our stories. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. However, it does get concerning to a point when the only thing we seem to care so much about is everyone's surface looks, and are constantly posting images that we view as attractive or cool to gain the attention of our partners and keep the relationship going. And to be honest, the same goes for me at times. Trust me. But by stumbling upon quotes like the one I've mentioned, I managed to neglect all these unfavorable circumstances in the world that we live in. Quotes like those make me think about my actions. The rush of emotions when you come across lines like, "The world may laugh, may call me absurd, selfish. That does not signify. My very soul demands you," is sacred to say the least, and it makes you think deep and hard about your own romance. Were there any bond, connection, or even contact? Are your emotions strong enough for this certain individual that you would be willing to give them your everything, like in the quote above? Do you really like who he or she is as a person, or is this just an in-the-moment sort of thing? I know that had made me reevaluate many of my affairs. Literature, essentially, was a fundamental patch in stitching up my nature and interpretations of romance. Even if today you may not fully grasp this new idea that I have planted in you, there is one takeaway today. Whilst reading literature, think, process the sentiments, and connect it to yourself. Think about all the times when you could have been having your own fairy tales, but instead are spent on media fantasies. And will literature be your key? Because it was mine, and I really do hope that it would be yours as well. Thank you.